And that is not a conservative position, my friends. My politics have not changed, but I am reacting to politics that have. And this is yet another example of how the woke invert the very thing that used to make liberals liberals. Olympic surfing exposes whitewashed native Hawaiian roots. Yeah, the Olympics added surfing this year. Good. Surfers deserve to be recognized as athletes. I'm sorry. What I meant to say is, no, that's cultural appropriation. The AP says that for Hawaiians, probably all two of them, including surfing in the Olympics, is an extension of the racial indignity seared into the history of the game and their homeland when white outsiders took over their spiritual art form. Or just people having fun in the ocean.
The director of the Olympic opening ceremony, a man whose career spanned decades, was abruptly fired just hours before the global spectacle was set to begin. The reason? A single Holocaust joke discovered in a comedy routine he performed a lifetime ago. This wasn't a recent transgression, it was a decades-old piece of satire, dug up from a past where context and comedic intent were apparently irrelevant. The world watched, stunned, as a man's legacy was erased, his professional life dismantled, all for a moment frozen in time that didn't strike people as beyond the pale when it originally occurred. The message was chillingly clear: no past misstep, no matter how distant or contextually nuanced, is ever truly forgotten.
Why do we allow the people who just want to always win? Days before that firing, the opening ceremony's musical director was also forced out because someone dug up an interview with him from 1994 where he admitted to bullying classmates as a child. As a child. Remember when your teacher used to try and scare you by saying, "This is going to go on your permanent record"? Yeah.
But the outrage machine had only just begun its work. Days before the shocking dismissal, the Olympic opening ceremony's musical director also met a similar fate. His crime? An interview unearthed from 1994 where he candidly admitted to bullying classmates as a child. A confession from his youth, a distant memory from decades past, was weaponized to strip him of his livelihood and reputation in the present. The once empty threat of a permanent record had terrifyingly materialized, demonstrating a relentless pursuit of imperfection that ignored growth, change, and the passage of time. The standards demanded were impossibly high, a complete erasure of human fallibility.
And the creative director of the entire shebang, of the whole Olympics, got shit-canned because he once made a fat joke in a private conversation. This is called a purge. It's a mentality that belongs in Stalin's Russia. How bad does this atmosphere we are living in have to get before the people who say cancel culture is overblown admit that is in fact an insanity that is swallowing up the world? Where did we get this crowd? I'm back, not the audience. I'm back. They're still. And that is not a conservative position, my friends. My politics have not changed, but I am reacting to politics that have. And this is yet another example of how the woke invert the very thing that used to make liberals liberals. Snitches and that's not being liberal.
The purges continued, escalating to an almost absurd degree. Even the creative director of the entire Olympic shebang was swiftly shot-canned for a remark made in a private conversation, a fat joke uttered in confidence. This wasn't a public statement or a broadcast error. It was a casual comment intended for a select few, dragged into the harsh spotlight of global judgment. This relentless excavation of personal histories, a microscopic examination of every word ever spoken, painted a stark picture of a society where even private thoughts and casual humor from the past could ignite a career-ending inferno. It was a terrifying display of control.
I must say, of all the violations of the woke penal code, cultural appropriation just might be the dumbest of all. First of all, there are 25,000 islands in the Pacific. How do we know a Hawaiian was the first to stand on a board in the water? It seems like something anyone in any ocean would eventually get around to. And if you're a surfer, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, or in between. You all taste the same to sharks.
Bill Maher, never one to shy away from uncomfortable truths, didn't mince words. He immediately branded these orchestrated oustings as nothing short of a purge, a mentality he vehemently declared belonged in Stalin's Russia. This wasn't just cancel culture, it was an escalating insanity, swallowing the world whole, demanding perfection from imperfect human beings. The atmosphere, he argued, had become so toxic, so unforgiving, that even those who once dismissed cancel culture as overblown were forced to confront its chilling reality. It represented a fundamental shift in societal expectations, one that rewarded denunciation over understanding.
Hawaiian did invent surfing. Should he or she have kept it to themselves? Most of human history is a horror story, but the good parts are about different groups coming together and sharing. It's sort of the whole point of the Olympics, which itself comes from Greece, where wrestling was invented as a way for completely heterosexual men to get to know each other. Badminton has roots in India. Tennis comes from France. Skiing from Scandinavia and Taekwondo from Korea. Judo was appropriated from the Far East and skateboarding from the far out.
Maher highlighted a profound inversion, the woke invert, the very thing that used to make liberals, liberals. He argued that the progressive movement, once a champion of tolerance, open debate, and individual growth, was now betraying its own foundational principles. The constant policing of thought, the unforgiving hunt for past transgressions, and the demand for ideological conformity stood in stark contrast to the liberalism he once knew. This wasn't an evolution, it was a distortion, morphing core tenets of freedom and discourse into their exact opposites, leaving a void where true liberal values once thrived. He condemned those perpetuating this culture as snitches, lurking in the shadows, constantly scanning for any misstep, any dirt they could leverage to publicly shame and destroy someone. It was a permanent hunt, he asserted, fueled not by a desire for justice or accountability, but by a hunger for control. These individuals, Maher observed, patiently sifted through years of tweets, old interviews, and forgotten posts, preserving evidence for the perfect moment to maximize outrage. Their meticulous digital archaeology ensured that no comment, no matter how insignificant or old, escaped their relentless scrutiny, creating an environment of perpetual fear. The woke crowd never forgives, and they never forget, Maher emphasized. Their patience was terrifyingly long, their memory absolute, context, intent, or the passage of time simply did not matter. All they needed was one line, one joke, one comment that can be twisted, reframed, and weaponized to unleash their outrage machine. Once found, a person's entire lifetime of achievements was rendered irrelevant, overshadowed by a single moment frozen in time. This wasn't about accountability, it was about absolute power, demonstrating a willingness to destroy careers over what Maher saw as trivial or misrepresented infractions. The discussion then shifted to sports, specifically the inclusion of surfing in the Olympics. The Associated Press, a supposedly unbiased news organization, published a headline that caught Maher's attention. Olympic surfing exposes whitewashed native Hawaiian roots. He scoffed at the premise, initially celebrating surfers finally getting recognition before sarcastically retracting, realizing the woke lens now required this to be labeled cultural appropriation. This reinterpretation of a universally enjoyed activity as an extension of racial indignities highlighted a bizarre new frontier for grievance culture, turning simple pleasure into a political battleground. Maher found the woke crowd's reinterpretation of ordinary moments almost comical. People having fun in the ocean, a universally understood form of recreation, was suddenly reframed as a profound spiritual or cultural statement ripe for dissection. They wrap these mundane situations in grand intellectual-sounding language, using buzzwords and dramatic framing to elevate trivialities into controversies. But strip away the inflated rhetoric, Maher argued, and there's often very little substance underneath. It was style over substance, performance over reality, turning harmless enjoyment into an imagined profound violation, devoid of true meaning. Of all the violations of the woke penal code, Maher declared cultural appropriation to be the dumbest of all. He immediately challenged its core logic, questioning the very idea of ownership over something as fundamental as standing on a board in the water. With 25,000 islands in the Pacific, how could anyone definitively claim a Hawaiian was the absolute first? He quipped, "It seems like something anyone in any ocean would eventually get around to." This irreverent questioning aimed to expose the absurdity of claiming exclusive cultural rights to activities that seem like natural human inclinations, regardless of origin. Maher argued that this obsession with cultural appropriation collapsed under its own flawed logic. He questioned why appreciation, curiosity, and the natural blending of cultures were suddenly treated as a crime in an interconnected world. Human progress, he stated, has always thrived on sharing ideas, music, fashion, and art across boundaries. Shutting down this cultural exchange, he believed, didn't protect culture, it isolated it, freezes it in place, and strips away the shared human experience that keeps culture alive. It fostered division where mutual admiration and shared experience should flourish. Even if for argument's sake Hawaiians did invent surfing, Maher posed a critical question: should he or she have kept it to themselves? He pointed out that most of human history is a horror story, but the good parts are about different groups coming together and sharing. This, he asserted, was sort of the whole point of the Olympics itself, which inherently celebrates shared human endeavor and skill, transcending origins. To demand cultural isolation was to reject the very essence of human progress and the spirit of global unity that events like the Olympics are supposed to embody. He then rattled off a list of widely accepted sports demonstrating their diverse and often appropriated origins. Wrestling came from Greece, badminton from India, tennis from France, skiing from Scandinavia, taekwondo from Korea, and judo was appropriated from the Far East. Even skateboarding, he joked, came from the far out. Maher's examples underscored that sharing and evolving cultural practices is not an anomaly but the norm throughout human history. To suddenly impose rigid ownership rules now was to ignore centuries of interconnectedness and mutual influence, denying the very lineage of global culture. The idea that the first to do something are the only ones who get to have it was a new rule Maher found deeply flawed. He used the example of Jewish people who have spent most of their history wandering, yet don't claim exclusivity over the act of milling around. He asserted that change is not synonymous with progress, and that this new idea that each culture must remain in its own separate silo is not better, it's not progress. This mindset, he argued, actively worked against the melting pot ideal, fostering insularity rather than the enriching exchange that has historically driven advancement. Maher argued these woke ideas prioritize rigid ideological rules over common sense and human curiosity, ultimately collapsing under basic scrutiny. They promote fear of saying the wrong thing, wearing the wrong thing, or appreciating the wrong tradition. This mindset, he believed, didn't unite people but isolated them, proving deeply harmful to the spirit of learning and freedom. He emphasized that societies thrive and evolve naturally through connection, not through artificial cultural boundaries or the suppression of shared experience, which is fundamentally against the human desire to explore. He stressed that not everything is about oppression. While stealing natural resources from indigenous people is undoubtedly exploitation, he humorously posited that not one Beach Boys song resulted in any Hawaiian having less waves to surf. Similarly, not one African record buyer stopped purchasing local music after Paul Simon made Graceland. In fact, it introduced many white buyers in America to African music. These examples highlighted that appreciation and influence don't equate to harm, but often to mutual benefit and broaden cultural horizons, enriching everyone involved without diminishing original sources. The inconsistency, Maher argued, exposed a clear double standard. He pointed to Korean boy bands making Western-style music, achieving global fame. "You don't get to #1 singing this," he noted, referring to traditional Korean music, implying their embrace of Western genres was key to their international success. Are we suddenly going to accuse Korean artists who perform Western music of cultural appropriation? He asked rhetorically. Of course not, they are celebrated. Yet, when the situation reverses and Western artists draw from other cultures, it's immediately labeled appropriation, creating an uneven and illogical playing field. This double standard creates an environment where some are free to explore and express themselves, while others are criticized for doing the exact same thing. Maher insisted that true cultural exchange should be a two-way street, not a one-sided privilege. The great thing about cultural mixing, he concluded, is that it makes things better for everyone. He celebrated the idea that BTS can be a hit in America and I can get kimchi on a taco, asking, "Isn't that better than everyone walling itself off from outsiders? I thought walls were supposed to be bad." The chilling extension of this cultural policing, Maher observed, was creating a world where straight actors are told they can't play gay roles and white novelists aren't allowed to imagine what it would be like to be a Mexican immigrant. This, he contended, was actively destroying empathy, the bedrock of liberalism. The very act of trying to inhabit the life of someone else is the essence of understanding and connection. To forbid such creative and imaginative exploration was to erect insurmountable barriers between people, stifling the artistic and intellectual curiosity that fosters human understanding. Maher's argument cut through the noise, exposing the fundamental contradiction at the heart of woke outrage culture. What began as a movement ostensibly for fairness and inclusion, he argued, had metastasized into a system of surveillance, judgment, and selective outrage. Instead of encouraging open dialogue, it punished curiosity. Instead of celebrating cultural exchange, it policed it. And instead of fostering unity, it meticulously created new arbitrary lines of division, demanding conformity rather than diversity of thought or experience, eroding the very principles it claimed to uphold, fostering an insidious new form of tribalism. He even injected a moment of characteristic humor, suggesting that if anyone deserves to balk about stealing in the Olympics, it's the horses in the equestrian events who have to watch humans get medals for everything they do. This sarcastic aside brilliantly underscored the sheer absurdity and manufactured outrage Maher saw in many of the cultural appropriation arguments, juxtaposing genuine exploitation with what he perceived as frivolous grievances. It was a sharp satirical jab at the self-serious nature of the discourse, injecting a much-needed dose of perspective into the discussion. Ultimately, Maher's impassioned commentary served as a stark reminder that true progress has never sprung from fear or restriction, but from openness, exploration, and the freedom to learn from one another. Cultures flourish by being shared, not by being locked away in separate silos. People evolve by making mistakes and growing, not by pretending to be perfect or by erasing their past. Societies become stronger through vibrant debate, diverse perspectives, and the courage to disagree. Common sense, he asserted, must prevail over rigid ideology, for unity is built through genuine connection, not through forced silence or absolute control.